Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show, another of our interviews with executives of mining companies when they make important news. In this case, it's I-80 Gold. And just to put things into context, I've sort of followed Ewan and his companies for quite some time, since the Wolfden version 1 that was bought out, and then Premier Gold was spun out and it got bought out. But at one time for Premier Gold, the Cove McCoy project was the #1 project. And I remember the grades that were coming out of this, and then it was waiting on a processing facility that you needed, and now you've got your hands on that, and you're bringing the Cove project back to life.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's ever gone away. It was sitting in the background, especially later in our life in Premier, because we had a bit of focus on the Mexican operating mine and the build out of Geraldton, and we also had the South Arturo operating mine. So it did need a processing agreement and really postponed, I'd say, the development. We always felt that it was a very high quality asset that deserved to get built, but we just didn't have a processing solution. So with our interim agreements that we have with Nevada Gold Mines and the fact that we acquired the Lone Tree Autoclave to have our own facility, McCoy Cove has come back front and center. I believe it's probably the highest grade of our gold deposits. And this early drilling, the first 9 holes that we've drilled from underground to better define the deposit for a future mine plan, definitely have been returning some very stellar grades and some very impressive widths.
Yeah, like in the highlights from this, 12.8 grams of gold over 14 meters and 13.8 over 7.6 meters. 11 grams of gold over 3.1 and 24 grams of gold over 14 and 44 grams of gold over 2.1. Another with 10 grammer over 3.6, 20 grammer over 2.3 meters, 11.4 grams over 7.9, and 9.6 over 22.8. Very nice numbers, Ewan.
Yeah, and it's good to see these kind of numbers and this kind of continuity. Obviously, when you get into a definition drill program on a gold deposit, things can't always be what they seem. And we're very happy with the hit ratio we're having right now. It's stellar with great grades, and we're only just drilling the upper northwest part of the CSD gap zone. So a substantial area we still have to drill. And down at the bottom portion, we had some historic intercepts that were up to over 50 meters. So we're looking forward to seeing how this deposit develops as we continue this program. And the entirety of this program from underground is 40,000 meters. So there is a lot of news to come out of this project.
You know, Ewan, and to put it into context, you know the market well. How many 1 million plus ounce, 10 gram plus deposits are out there, especially down the development discount window? And, this is a pretty special situation to have that kind of thickness, grade, and continuity.
Yeah, definitely. I could probably count them on one hand, maybe two, in all of North America, including currently operating mines. So it is really unique. But remember, because of the timeline that it's going to take to develop, it's actually our #3 project. So pretty good results for the #3 project in our portfolio.
Well, Tyler put it into pretty good context. He said, and I quote, "The underground drilling program at Cove is focused on defining mineralization for ultimate mine planning. The first 9 holes drilled have demonstrated continuity of gold mineralization in the upper portion of the CSD gap horizon, confirming Cove as one of the highest grade development stage gold deposits in North America." End quote.
Yeah, that's that is a great quote. I think it's pretty accurate. There's not too many programs where you see this kind of continuity. We see a lot of companies releasing high grade results, but I always urge, and I know we've talked about this offline, that look at every hole. Don't a lot of companies, if they drill 20 holes, they highlight 4, whereas the other 16 aren't so good. And I think that's one thing that we're seeing here at Cove is very good continuity of mineralization. Hole 6 had lower grade material, but as you know, when you're defining a program, you're also trying to define the limits for your mine plan. So you do try to actually, well, you don't want to hit zeros or low grade, but you do want to define where exactly the ore body is, so that when you build your mine plan, you're doing it on real data, and you know exactly where to mine and where not to.
Because we've seen failures in mining operations that have been very painful for the shareholders when they don't have that continuity and they're not drilled off significantly enough.
Yes, for sure. I could there's a couple in northwestern Ontario where our office is over the last 5-7 years that have had failures, and we're learning. We learn from those things, or we hope to learn as a mining company. When you see something not quite work out the way companies have planned, even Granite Creek, our project that we're just ramping up again, Atna went bankrupt on this project. So what did we learn from what they did, or what did they fail on that we need to make sure that we won't repeat? So drill it more. We test mined some of the areas that they had drilled off and found that the ground conditions just weren't quite there to generate positive returns. So the drill program was very successful in delineating the OG zone to depth. We discovered the South Pacific zone, and we did the test mining in the OG zone as well, like we did in the upper parts, and found that the continuity and the ground conditions were quite good and should mean that we can mine it quite profitably. And now we've put on 4 levels, putting in a 5th level and getting ready to drift over to the South Pacific zone. But we started that underground program about 16-18 months ago. We did the rehabilitation, the underground drilling, and we still haven't yet called an official production decision, but we think it's pretty imminent. And we're planning to do the same thing at Granite Creek. Once we get the permits, put in the underground infrastructure, do the definition drilling first, do some test mining in some of the zones to make sure that the ground conditions and what we're hoping to achieve in mining, or the mining method we're going to use long term, and then do our feasibility study. So it's done on real data. And here at Cove, we're doing the same thing. We put in the first phase of the underground decline. We're now drilling from underground, definition drilling, to be able to design what the mine plan should look like. And as we've been drifting down, we've been hitting fault structures and various different types of rocks, and we're learning how to work with those before we call a construction decision. So I think that's the failure. Some of the failures you mentioned are companies that drill it from surface. They get a third-party engineering firm come build them a mine plan. They say they've got a feasible mine. They raise all the money. They build it. They go underground, and then often what you find down there isn't what you expected. And these companies are consistently raising money because, oh, we just need to fix this and we need to fix that. I think Detour was a huge, had like 6 financings in a row after they started because of issues. It's working great now, and that's why Nico owns it, but they definitely had a lot of growing pains. Pure Gold in Red Lake was obviously one that recently faltered, unfortunately. And our view is they just didn't do the early work, put in multiple levels, test mine, make sure you can mine it before you tell the world that you have a mine. And that's what our plan is to maybe take a more cautious approach and a more measured approach to becoming a miner, but make sure we do it right.
I think that's good to summarize for investors out there, Ewan, is to, to summarize, I think it's drill more, understand the distribution of the metals you want to mine, understand the rocks you want to mine, and do some test bulk sampling so you can understand what exactly you have. Did I get it right?
Exactly right. It could be when you drill off a project, you do your rock work, and the engineers come in, and of course everybody wants to do long hole mining because it's cheaper. And if the company based on surface drilling, the engineer can agree, well, in our model we're going to use long hole mining, but then they get underground and you have a difficult hanging wall or footwall or something that causes bad ground condition, and you find that the long hole mining is causing excessive dilution, you're going to have to go and do cut and fill instead, then your feasibility study is essentially thrown out the window. So what I think I've learned over my career and going from a pure explorationist now into mining is, it's a tough business. It's not easy. Ore bodies are never easy. Very few, very simple deposits. And you need to get it right to be profitable, and make sure you do the early work before you actually say you're a miner, because then you have less chance of having to explain to the market what you did wrong and what you're fixing. And I'd like to think that once we come out with our feasibility plan for Granite Creek, where we're underground and where we are actually mining, is here's the feasibility. It's based on this mining method. We've proved that works. Here's the deposit that we've drilled off from underground. We've demonstrated the continuity from what we've drilled and can show that we find the same continuity and reconciliation of our stopes, our early stopes, to what we had planned, so that when we deliver our feasibility study, it's, well, this is how it's working today. And maybe it's not that super low mining cost that we employ that some guys do just to have a good looking feasibility, but definitely want to make sure that when we're mining at a profit.
You gave my audience a lot of good information there, Ewan, for their investment purposes. One of my geologist friends once said, we're not in the business of swapping dollars for dollars, or dollars for 80 cents or 50 cents. And that it's goes to show you have your mind on that.
I'm a pretty major shareholder of our company, so I need this to work for us. So we're trying to make sure that our entire team has a similar vision of what we're going to achieve, how we're going to achieve it, and then achieve it.
We've taken a lot of your time, Ewan. There was one other thing I saw in the news release that stood out to me. Cove is one of 3 projects currently being advanced to realize the company's goal of becoming the 2nd largest gold producer in Nevada. That's a big one in front of you, but that portends for quite a significant growth pattern.
Yeah, it does. We're pretty keen to realize our goal of becoming the 2nd largest gold producer. It's not going to happen overnight, but our plan is to transition over the next 4.5 years from being a small producer, which we are going to be this year, into what could be considered a mid-tier, operating in the world's safest mining jurisdiction.
To get to that 2nd goal, there will be a very impressive annual growth pattern in the production.
Yes, next year we expect to see a pretty significant jump in terms of production compared to what we're going to see this year.
So you got a lot of news coming out, Ewan, on a constant basis. That's why we do so many of these shows, and you guys never fail me, man.
Okay, well, we'll keep trying to not fail you.
I'm going to close it off, Ewan. Did you have any closing comment, or are we good?
No, I think we see today a bit of a rattle in the gold price, mainly off probably it seems that Canada raised their interest rates a 1/4 point. I guess they're trying to squash the economy a little further, both here, and I think perception is that the US is going to follow suit here. But raising interest rates, as we talked about on our last episode, isn't a good thing when you have debt levels that our countries do. The servicing of that debt just gets more and more expensive, which is, in my opinion, better and better for the long-term prospects of gold. So buy gold.
It's a
downward spiral.
Yeah. Thanks, Ewan. Let me close it off, man.
Okay.
As I started this show, I wanted to mention a little bit about the history that Ewan and I have had together. He was the first sponsor of my shows back in 2005 with the original Wolfton. I actually have a picture of my first sponsor's check. And we had great success there. They got taken over. Premier Gold was spun out. That was a great success, and they were bought out. And now Ewan has his sights set on I-80 Gold and creating the second largest producer of gold in Nevada. And if he does that, it will by far be his biggest success. And I think they're well on the way to doing exactly that. They get great numbers with all the drilling, and they just continue it on 3 key projects now. And collectively, all their assets, I think, are clearly the assets needed to build them into that kind of a company. And that kind of a company tend to have billions in the valuations, and they're trading well under $1 billion now. So I think this is a cornerstone investment for investors in the space. And I think it will be well rewarded for having it as a cornerstone investment. Do your homework, speak with your financial advisors. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.